The FujiCast is an independent Loading Zone production.
Kev, you're getting married. Does Gemma know?
It is the most complicated story on planet Earth.
Who's she marrying? Is she marrying Jeff Goldbump?
It is really bizarre. Yes. So to put this into context, which I think we should, we are technically legally married, and we have been for so many years.
When you say technically married, do you mean you got married on some yogi organised this for you on the top of a mountain in Nepal or something? Or?
No. So we must be married 13 years because Gemma was pregnant when we got married and Rose was 13 in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So, no. So what happened was we got married because we loved each other, and we got married in a very small wedding, registry office in Cirencester, all of that stuff, and then, carried on my life. That's presented a few problems in terms of, from a religious point of view, in terms of church and communion and all that kind of stuff. Right. So we spent the last 18 months or so. Gemma's wanted to become a Catholic for a long time. So we've managed to get all of the I's dotted, and the Pope has done his paperwork and all that kind of stuff.
Because the Pope has to say yes, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's technically him, but yeah, one of his minions.
Oh, I like to think it's him.
Yeah, it might be. You might write a little letter. Yeah. Go on, Kev. You can do it.
He says, I like that, Mullins. I've got his X100, original X100 book.
But it's interesting because somebody posted on the Facebook group. Can you imagine that? Yeah. Someone posted on the Facebook group about Boris Johnson and Carrie, what's her name? Carrie Underwood? Is that his wife's name? Was his wife's name?
Carrie Undercarriage, yeah.
Carrie Undercarriage. They said that, he shouldn't be, they shouldn't have got married in the Catholic Church, but actually they could have, they did. They were entitled to, because neither of them even married before in a Catholic church, whereas I married my first wife, where Gemma's first husband was best man in a Catholic church. And so that means that if Gemma wanted to become a Catholic, we had to get all of the paperwork and all of this stuff from previous confirmation certificates and all that kind of stuff from Simon, her ex-husband, and my ex-wife obviously has not replied to any of the letters or anything like that, which is fine. So that's all done and dusted. So yeah, so Gemma will become a religious buddy, and we're gonna get a Catholic wedding done on the same day.
It all sounds so complicated. All I want to know is one thing: does this mean now legally she can neck the communion wine?
The FujiCast.
Well, the only thing I'm not very happy about with this marriage lark, Kev, and I don't want to trivialise obviously the communion wine, but I can't make the date, Kev.
No, very sad, but I did pick the middle of August.
Did you do it on purpose?
Yeah, didn't want you there, really.
I thought that might be the case. Well, welcome to the FujiCast. I'm sorry I'm back. I know you really liked Kev being with Gemma, but it's you and your questions from our electronic mailbag, and of course also through the FujiCast private Facebook group that you're welcome to become a part of. If you'd like to send a mail, send it to click@fujicast.co.uk. If you're not a Fujifilm shooter, don't worry, it's a big community. Whatever flavour you shoot, you're very welcome. I noticed, by the way, Kev, that we got to the 2K mark at last, properly, officially.
I got my own jingles.
Oh my God, have you got a jingle pack now? Oh, what else do you have on that pad of yours?
Oh, I got all sorts.
Oh dear. Oh no.
Hours and hours and hours of fun I'm going to have with you now.
If you thought you were sick of my button box, if you pardon the expression, now you've got two. And we've got the book of the week this week. What have we got, Kev? What's book of the week?
I'm going to have to come and raid your shelf because I think I'm running out of books. I got London Nights, which is a Hoxton Mini Press one. Okay. Don't think we've done it before.
No, I don't think we have. And you're a bit of a fan of Hoxton Mini Press, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do like that. Chris O'Sullivan is going to be our guest. Now, he was a book of the week, wasn't he, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, he sent it to us, yeah.
Yeah, the year the year the world stood still. And so I thought, really, today it was an opportunity. It's not so much an interview with Chris and about his life, although I'm sure we'll take an interest. It's more really about producing a book and getting off your jacksie and thinking, I've always wanted to make a book, and here's a man that went out and did it. So I thought, let's talk about that.
Yeah, good idea.
Right, questions. Do you want to start?
Yes. On my tiny little monitor, which I'm finding very difficult to scroll up and down with. And for some reason, I can't minimize Skype either. So I've got your massive face staring at me.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Right, from the Facebook group, I'm going to start at the bottom, and the most recent one is from Steve Horn. He says, Kevin, so it's directed at me, presumably, what is the new Google page experience stuff all about, and what does it mean for our websites?
Right. Oh, yeah. I get a bit scared when Google sends stuff out, and I kind of like hide it in the corner of a screen somewhere because I think I'm never going to be able to understand this. So come on, Kev, spill the beans.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be totally honest with you, it is quite easy to misunderstand all of this stuff. So Google have, for about 18 months, they've been warning us that they're going to be doing this new kind of page insight stuff. And for them to give 18 months warning is pretty rare. And so it means that it's going to have a big impact. And it has had a big impact. It's kind of rolled out through May and June this year. And Steve mentioned Google Page Experience, which ultimately is what this is all about. If your website doesn't have a good page experience, it's going to really suffer, regardless of the technical SEO, regardless of keywords. And, if you've spent all night, kind of doing all the technical elements and getting every single alt text right and all that kind of stuff. If the website is difficult to navigate, difficult to use, then it's gonna be ignored, or it's gonna probably fall down the rankings. And we've all been those local newspaper websites, those ones, and you go on there and it throws a blinking BMW advert at you, full screen video, and then you have to, it tries to make you answer a question to read the article and all of that stuff. All of those will kind of have quite a dramatic impact. This will. So yeah, I mean, if you've got anything that moves around on the page, that's bad. So things like ads or any pop-ups, those kind of things that kind of move around and stop people from being able to see the text if they resize their screen or anything like that. Those kind of things are going to start being impacted. But I think for photography websites generally, mostly they're going to be okay, because typically people are just showing off their pictures and a little bit of text. There's no fancy stuff going on. It's really
There's two things that I can think of here, though, Kev. Number one, the message that comes up to make sure that people know cookies. Can I eat your cookies? That message, is that going to upset the page experience? And the other one is, there are some photographers, myself included, and you, that have pop-ups if you want to join a mailing list. And a lot more photographers have those these days. So do we need to switch those off?
Well, the cookie stuff and everything, yes, on the websites that you go to, and they're huge, and you can't go anywhere any further before pressing accept the cookies and everything, I think probably there will be an impact. I can't say for sure, but I would hope so, because think about it from a human point of view. We go to those websites. You found something on Google. You think, I want to read that article. You go there, and then it brings up a dialog box that you can't get rid of until you tick loads of boxes, and then you've got to scroll down and say, I accept. Blah blah blah. And this is all to do with GDPR and all that box. That is just awful. And yes, hopefully those kind of things will go away, because I absolutely hate them. And if you think about it, like I said, from a human point of view, if it annoys you as a human, then that's what Google's looking at. If it's annoying, so your pop-up that says sign up to my mailing list, if that's annoying to general people, then yes, it probably will have an impact. However, I don't know about you, but my Squarespace one, I don't have it on my wedding website, but on f16.click I do. But I have it so it only comes up if they scroll down more than 3/4 of the page. It comes up in the corner. I don't have it pop up on mobile, and it doesn't appear again for that particular user. If they don't sign up, they don't sign up. It doesn't come back again when they come back the next day. So I think that would be all right. But yeah, if it's annoying people, physically people, then it will have an impact. So squarely at those newspaper websites.
Yeah, you bet. Newspaper sites, of course, have an added issue here, don't they? Because of course they need subscribers now, because the old-fashioned way of going out and buying a newspaper in the morning, that's kind of going, isn't it? People consume their news online, and of course, people like The Guardian. I think The Guardian do it, don't they? They need you to subscribe, and that those pop-ups that if you want to read any further, what about the $5 a month?
Yeah, well, that's slightly different, because that's a paywall. So that's a business model that they're basically saying you can't get access to it until you pay for it, and that's fine, because you just can't get access to it. I'm thinking of the kind of more of those local newspaper websites. We've got one called Wiltshire Gazette, which is a physical paper, but you go to the website and it's just crammed full of adverts, because of course, yeah, you're right, they're not making any money elsewhere. These adverts are terrible, and it's it's all of those kind of, I don't know, you'll never believe what Dawn from EastEnders looks like now kind of things, and men of 48 years old need to click on this to claim their rightful pension. It's all targeted, and it just gets right in the way of the content, and that's the kind of stuff that I think will really get its ass kicked.
They're going to have to really rethink their advertising methods, aren't they?
Well, they've had 2 years nearly to rethink it, and the Wiltshire Gazette is still the same. So hopefully, but I'm saying the Wiltshire Gazette, that's the one I read, but they're all syndicated. So all of these websites, if I go to the South Wales Argus, it's exactly the same website, but it has local news in there. So there's some kind of big conglomerate business at the top of these websites that probably need to be doing their thing, I would say. But yeah, photography sites, I don't think too much of a worry. What everybody really should be doing is using Webmaster Tools, or Google Console as it's called now, because that will tell you exactly any pages. It's a traffic light system, a little bit like the ridiculous one for traveling across the countries. However, the one in the Google Console works. So it will say green if your page is good. It will say orange if orange means it's not failing, but it could be better. Red means it's failing and needs addressing.
I haven't asked this question for so long, so there's bound to be some people that have perhaps joined the podcast. But we used to talk all the time, it seemed, extensively about Squarespace and whether it was good really to be on that platform, because for quite a long time, obviously, the conversation was, no, you don't want to be on Squarespace necessarily, because WordPress is much better for your search engine optimization, and Google send them Christmas cards.
No, none of that is true, because ultimately all content management systems, all they do is generate HTML. And so, yes, there are plugins and widgets and all of that kind of stuff that can help you with your SEO. But ultimately, the best websites are the most simple ones. And that's it. It's about how much content comes to it, how much traffic. So, yeah, I'm building a WordPress site now for another person, basically. It's hard. It really is hard compared to the Squarespace stuff I've been using. Yeah, it's given me a lot more options in terms of the functionality, because they need specific stuff that's really just not available in Squarespace. Like they need ticketing and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a joy for me to use it anymore, WordPress, and I used to enjoy it, but I've used Squarespace for so long, where everything is just really, really simple that it's a bit of a headache.
I wonder why Squarespace don't think about stuff like ticketing. They do have a commerce side, don't they? Yeah,
you can get third-party integrations and stuff, but really the whole, if you look at the history of Squarespace, it's aimed more at small businesses that really want to make it very simple, to make very beautiful. That was their premise: simple and beautiful. Without overcomplicating things. So I think their business market is right. I think, personally, I think it's perfect for me and for most kind of websites. If you want something a lot more complicated, then WordPress does give you more opportunities. However, you'll probably, if you want something really, really complicated, you're probably better off getting a proper design agency in to hard code it and put a fully fledged CMS behind it. Depends on what you want, really.
Joshua Rothman, this was kind of a comment on a post, but it's become a question, and you sent it through to me the other day, so I'm assuming you want to...
This one, sorry, this was the one that Gemma and I started last week.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a big question, we tried for basically about an hour trying to get words out, and it just didn't happen. So I promised Joshua that we would have it this week.
Do it this week instead. That was great, by the way, you and Gemma.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I listened in 2 parts: on the way over to have my jab, and on the way back. You were my jab companion.
Good.
Dear Kevin and Neil, I'm a hobby photographer who takes pictures of my family. My question is about video and nostalgia. Recently, I've been dabbling in making short family videos. Nothing elaborate, just 3 or 4 clips edited together that might capture a day on the beach or a breakfast. I'm a competent photographer, but I find video on Fuji a little overwhelming. Most of the tutorials seem designed for YouTubers or filmmakers who are aiming to produce high-quality cinematic video with cuts and B-roll and all that stuff. I enjoy the simplicity of candid family photography, and I'm not sure how I feel about the added gear and editing work required to make those kinds of films. Meanwhile, my wife has an old VHS tape, careful, of her family's movies. It's a compilation of clips taken over 40 years, starting in the 50s and ending in the 90s. presented in only rough chronological order. All the clips are silent. The oldest taken with some kind of 8mm movie camera. They show a snippet of a wedding, some kids playing in the street, houses in Brooklyn and the suburbs, family Barbies, funeral and so on, all through the decades, with cars and clothes and people from different eras. At one point, an uncle who died as a pilot in the Vietnam War brings the camera inside his cockpit, takes off, performs some barrel rolls. In fact, that's how the tape ends, in the air. From a technical standpoint, the footage is grainy, shaky, blurry, and of course there's no sound, music, text, or any clever editing. But it's an incredibly moving and beautiful tape, almost as though somebody dropped off a box of old film reels at a film processing centre and said, "Can you transfer these to tape, mate?" No one in the family today knows who put the film together or even when. I have 2 questions. I know that was I think you needed a lot of context to go into it, didn't you? Do you think that today's average digital footage, ungraded, poorly mic'd, made with iPhones, GoPros and so on, will age as well as the silent film footage on my wife's tape? Will we be equally moved in the future by super wide action cam video? Or is it important to make better footage because it will better stand the test of time? Well, there we go. There were 2 questions, so let's deal with one part at a time. What do you think first, since I've spent ages reading the question? I do have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, first of all, I love the story. I love the story of those film clips.
Yeah.
Just being in the family. And when I read that originally, I was thinking, he's spot on. You go to YouTube these days, and unless I'm looking for something very specific, if I'm just looking through my usual kind of feed, it is full of awesomeness and smash it this and blinking jingles and all of that kind of stuff. And it's very it's very good. Some of it is very good and it's highly produced. If I'm looking for inspiration or if I'm looking for something that I want to enjoy rather than get information from, I'll typically go to Vimeo. And we talked about that last week actually as well. In terms of an artistic point of view, I think Vimeo is better. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can create whatever you want, and as long as you enjoy it, it doesn't have to be the best thing in the world. It could be the worst thing in the world, but that's very subjective, because if you enjoy it and the people who you show it to and your family enjoy it, then everyone's a winner. Yeah. That's my thought on it. That's my take on it.
Well, I think it's the same as your silent footage. It's still nostalgia. It may look technically different to a high extent, but what will shine through really is one word: story. Not how it was shot, how it sounds, who's in it. It's story. And you can make so-called better footage, but the only thing that matters really is that word, isn't it? Who is in the pictures? Why did you make it? I'm big into why at the moment. And what difference it will make to the viewer when they view it. I think that's the only thing you need to worry about. And hell, if when you link it all together, there's this sudden jump of, poof, that looks different. Well, that's just another sign of the times, isn't it? And that's part of that story.
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that the modern stuff isn't useful, but it's it's like people who like listening to 1920s music. It sounds different. It's probably not been reprocessed and all that kind of stuff, and that doesn't make it any less enjoyable for those people. So yeah, story. You're right. The story is the most important thing, and ultimately, if it's not for any kind of promotional thing, then who cares?
Yeah, we were talking about Cerys Matthews yesterday, weren't we? Cerys has a show on 6 Music on the BBC in the UK. I don't know if you can get it outside, but anyway. She plays really old, almost like wax cylinder stuff sometimes, alongside new stuff from I was going to say CD, but that's old-fashioned, alongside vinyl, whatever. I mean, sometimes the poetry she plays, I love her show, is really crackly old sort of 40s, 50s recordings, but it kind of all melds together, doesn't it?
Yeah, she's wonderful. I actually have not listened to that show, but I will, because I really love her. She was the turn at a wedding I did once.
I know.
But yeah, and she's got such a laconic voice as well, and lots of she's very, very, very art driven. She's not just a pop star, as they say. But yeah, it's I would love to have her just speaking into my ear and going to sleep at night.
I was about to say ASMR. I would be straight on there and sign up to the Patreon. Second part, is it possible that making highly produced family films with a soundtrack, B-roll and so on is a mistake? Could it be better to just let clips sit in a digital drawer for a few years select a few of them, throw them together without thinking too much about it, trusting that their meaning will increase with time. My instinct is that I'd prefer to spend fewer hours in front of Final Cut Pro than leave a mystery tape behind when I shuffle off this mortal coil. But I also wonder whether it's even possible to aim for that outcome in our digital age. Apologies for the long question, but I've been mulling over this for a while, as my hard drives are filling up with clips. I'd value your perspective as my photography gurus. Oh, don't put us too high. Josh Rothman, Long Island, New York.
Yeah, well, I think the part of the problem is that it's so easy to create these days. We've all got millions of clips on our phones, millions of them. And, if it's family stuff, you're reticent to delete it. So you leave it on your phone and then it gets uploaded to your, wherever your Apple stuff goes, iCloud. And, mine goes up to Dropbox and that fills up. And then, it becomes a chore to look through them all and decide which ones you're going to keep, which ones you're not. And then you end up just sticking them on a hard drive and thinking, I'll sort that out later. It goes in a drawer. And then 30 years later, that's where they'll end up probably. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. The simple answer is don't press record until you're sure.
Well, you said it really in your second para. The meaning does increase, I think, with time. Cars, fashions, those that survive the footage, loved ones, maturity is what's going to make this special. I mean, I don't think it matters whether this is digital film, VHS, Betamax, whatever, as we said before. Think of this. I keep coming back to story. Set up conflict resolution. Make a story out of it. But it's quite...
Set up a conflict?
Yeah. No, not set up a conflict. The 3-part... What's that thing called? 3-part... We learned this in school, Kev, didn't we? 3-part... the way they put plays together. Set up, conflict, resolution.
Okay. I never learned that in school.
That's the way you make a story.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Set up conflict. Come on then, Pol Pot. What's next?
I don't think he produced any films. Right, yours.
So, a question from Colin Monteith. He says, "Hi, Kevin and Neil. Question for the show. I have Fuji, and in particular, love my X100V. But I'm mostly monochrome. Oh, I can see where this is going. I'm mostly monochrome. And in the new never-ending quest for the ultimate black and white, I bought a Leica Q2M. The argument, nice. The argument over a post-converted RAW conversions versus pure monochrome luminosity sensor will go on forever. Yeah, you're not wrong. Any chance Fujifilm will introduce an M, X Pro or X100, an APS-C resolution with no RGB would be sensational. We've chatted about that many, many times, and I believe that there are many, many people inside and outside of Fujifilm that would love it, including some of the pretty high-end people in the decision-making process. But ultimately, would it sell? That's the thing. The Leica Q2M, I've seen pictures from it. It is absolutely beautiful. I would, give my right arm for a monochrome sensor, a proper monochrome sensor, not just one that just converts it, but one that is with no RGB technology inside it would be great. I agree. I don't think it will happen personally. I think the answer will be we shall consider.
Yeah, I wonder whether it was all going to come down to that. Would be nice though, wouldn't it?
I laughed. Yeah. Did you see? Didn't laugh, but did you see that Fujifilm had their servers ransomwared last week? So they had a big hack, and one of these things, where they say, right, you've got to pay us 25 million bitcoins or whatever it is, and we'll give you your systems back. And there's been a big spate of this recently. And in a lot of cases, because I was reading about it, in a lot of cases, the companies just pay it. They don't really talk about it, but they pay it. But Fujifilm didn't. They give them a good old, we shall consider, and then just restored from backup.
I don't think I've got any. Have I got any Bitcoin hanging around? I still don't understand entirely how this works, because Bitcoin's worth what? It sort of fluctuates between 22 and 30k or whatever price is set by some that seem to talk out. I think Elon Musk, if he says something, it sort of flies up and down, doesn't it? The value of it. But I went into a shop whilst on holiday a couple of weeks ago now, and it said we accept Bitcoin. I was thinking, well, how can you accept Bitcoin? Each one's worth about 25k. Can you break it down, Kev?
I don't know. I really don't know. I know as little about it as you do, really. I know that it's it's democratic currency, in that it's not tied to any state, it's not tied to any bank, nothing like that. So there's no political interference with it. which is the case with a lot of currencies. So, I really don't know about the mechanisms behind it. I really don't. It's way above my kind of brain level. But interestingly, I was watching one of the. I don't know why she's remarrying me. She came in the other day. I was watching chess on my laptop. I was playing chess on my phone, and I had the Wales game on S4C in Welsh on the telly.
She really loves you.
She just came in, looked at me, shook her head, and then walked out again. But anyway, this particular chess tournament they had the prize fund was at the start of it was $100,000 equivalent in Bitcoin.
Right.
And all the way through this kind of 7 days of the tournament, they had a thing at the bottom, a scale to show exactly how much it was. So when the final piece was moved on the last game, that's what they were going to give the players. And it was 79,000 by that point. So it'd gone down 21,000 in 7 days.
Yeah, there was one. What's the country that are going to make it legal tender?
Is it Bolivia, I think?
Is it Bolivia?
It's one of the Central American countries, wasn't it? I think it was Bolivia. Yeah.
Ah, right. Johan Borhead. Hello, Barbie. Hello, Ken. Just to bring us back to normality. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand that, you have to listen to a show a couple of weeks back. When you fall in love with a camera, what are the 3 things you mostly tend to like? Did you do this on the show the other day?
Yeah, we did this last week.
You did that one, didn't you? Can't do that. Oh, I did that just so you could play me one of your jingles. I was thinking, I'm sure they answered this one. So that shows you I did listen. It
does, yeah. I was going to let you read it all out. And
no, because I was reading. I think, hang on, no. They did this one and the Barbie and the Ken bit. I'm excited though. By the way, and it was that show. You kind of, I kind of knew this story anyway. But the moment I heard you and Gemma talking about the fact of the X100V thing that you. That you snuck in. You were well and truly busted with that one.
Yeah.
So that just, I'd been talking about it for weeks, and I thought, it. Kev did it, and Gemma was fine on the podcast about it, so I'm going to buy one.
Yeah, put in a Tesco carrier bag. Sam will never notice.
It arrives Monday. I'm going to say, no, that's my X Pro 1. She'll never know the difference. I might put a label on it. Have I got another one, or can you do one? Should we have one more from the Facebook group before we go for this week's interview?
Yeah. Okay, so this next question is from Joe Bowden, and he says, so I have a few weddings this July carried over from last year that want to go ahead. But one has decided they don't want to prep part any longer and are looking for a substantial discount as the numbers are reduced throughout the day as well, due to the restrictions, of course. So is Joe in the UK? I think so. So obviously restrictions might not be there from 21st of June. Fingers crossed. Anyway, we don't know. So how to go about telling her that she's not getting a discount without coming across too heavy and potentially making the day a frosty occasion.
How many times? Sorry, I did. Have they cancelled a few times previously? Did you say?
Yeah, I think so. So this is a rebooking to this July, and essentially they're going to go with the 30 people rather than the, let's just say, 120 people, and so they want to pay a lot less.
Yeah. So if there's less people at our wedding, doesn't matter that you're there for the same amount of time, making the same effort, and are expected to probably produce the same amount of photographs. We still want it cheaper.
Yeah, that was my initial thought. So it is a really tricky one because you're right about not wanting to be frosty, but also you don't want to lose the booking completely. But yeah, that's the way to deal with it and that's what you should say to them is, look at the time. Yes, okay, if they don't want bridal prep any longer, then knock a little bit off. But if they want you there, let's just say they want you there for 6 hours instead of 8 hours, then offer them, a 2-hour reduction in that fee. But that's the way to play it. Yeah, definitely.
It's a bit hard-nosed, but I remember the words of a negotiator whose podcast I produced. I've known him for quite a while. He negotiates with lots of supermarket businesses, so he knows what he's doing. And he always had this negotiation tactic of his was, right, okay, so you want it cheaper, fine. Which bits of my service don't you want?
Yeah.
And then he would go quiet. Because, that's, in essence, you're saying, well, I want everything you do, but I want it at half price. Well, that's fine, but not so fine. Which bits aren't important to you? But we're in a very touchy-feely business. And I remember saying this to him. I said, his name's Steve. I said, Steve, it's very difficult to negotiate that way in an artisan. And before I could even get to the end of the sentence, he said a rude word and said, no, it's not. It's the same. It's the same negotiation tactic. You may need to be softer in the way you deliver it, but essentially say the same things. You're still negotiating for a business.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm pretty, I'm pretty forthright with my kind of reductions and things like that. It does come down to, if you want to pay less, you will get less, and I think that's an important thing. It is really tricky at the moment though, because I feel sorry for the photographers. Of course I do, because I am one, and I've got a couple of weddings in July, one of which is already kind of moving it again, moving it again, because they're worried that the go free day on the 21st June won't happen. At the same time, I desperately feel sorry for the clients. I mean, this particular person, this will be their 5th attempt, and it's like, and there will have been cost involved for them on all of these things. So I mean, it is really, really tricky. But ultimately, you can't do it for nothing. Simple as that. And the easiest way to persuade them or to explain to them is on the time basis. If you want me there for a little bit less, fine, I'll reduce the price a little bit less as a gesture of goodwill. But and if they say to you, well, we only want you there for 1 hour, then you have to decide whether you want to do that wedding and charge them for 1 hour's worth of work. But if they want you there for the 6 hours, but they only want to pay you for 1 hour, then that's when you need to go and get Steve from Sainsbury's and explain to them properly.
No, I certainly wouldn't send Steve in there to negotiate your wedding stuff. He's a lovely chap, but I'm not sure that's his game. But he does speak a lot of sense. He really does. Negotiate this was the thing that we were building and working on together. Anyway, but it is a very difficult one, really difficult one. And you mentioned just a moment Freedom Day, because that's what the press are calling it, aren't they? And of course, this comes out on Freedom Day, so we have no idea as we're speaking, Kev, what this means for the UK opening up, because as we're speaking, let's come clean, it's a Friday when we're recording this. This goes out on the Monday. Absolutely.
21st is Freedom Day.
Freedom Day is 21st. So 14th is when they make the decision whether Freedom Day will happen. That's what I meant.
Okay, sorry, I'll take back my trombone.
Can you? Yeah. So we don't know. What yesterday I got a little text from Sam as I was stood in the queue at the dentist, which is not my favourite place to be, but it did raise my spirits for a moment when I saw that she'd sent me a link to a Times piece which suggested that whilst the country, some of it might not do what it wanted to do come the 21st, the weddings would be allowed to go ahead with unlimited numbers. I actually saw it in the Times physically. So yeah, I read that too, and I think fingers crossed. Who knows, Kev? Who knows?
Well, who does know? But yes, I mean the Times is more kind of aligned with the inside of the Conservative Party, isn't it? So I think probably I take their word with quite a healthy bit of trust.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. I hope you're right, Kev.
Yeah, I do as well.
What about this, though? We can't see into the future. You already know the answer if you're listening to this podcast.
That's true.
Shall we speak to Christopher O'Sullivan? I liked his book, The Year the World Stood Still, and this was your book of the week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I can't remember when, probably a few months back.
Yeah.
It was a lovely book, yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought this week... We've got some really exciting interviews coming up. I know you've got some in the plans, Kev, and I'm going to be talking with Carl, who put that extraordinary. He must have spent ages writing that piece in the Facebook group, by the way, about using video properly within Fujifilm cameras. And we're going to. It was a
wonderful post, wasn't it?
It was really good, and I'm going to be talking to him about that. But today, Christopher O'Sullivan, if you've ever thought about piecing a book together, these next few minutes hopefully will be an inspiration to you. And I'll tell you why. Chris, as you're about to hear, is to, or paraphrase slightly from the interview so as not to be a complete spoiler, quote, an ordinary Joe who always felt that making a book, writing prose, pictures, or otherwise was really for the clever folk. He's been through a real explorative time, has Chris, to make this book about the world experience we've all been on or endured, and so on. He's produced his own memoir, his own way to mark this time. And he went on to make a book, a micro-publishing adventure, since that seems to be the on-trend way to describe smaller runs of commercial books. But commercial it is, and out there it is. I speak to many, I suppose, household-named photographers about their books, a product of years of experience. In fact, I want to tell you about one immediately after, but to make your first book, to see it in print, to hold it, to say, I did this, list tick, Now Let Me Make My Next, I think is something really special. Christopher O'Sullivan. The Year the World Stood Still is the book we've reviewed in the past. Let me get a handle on you as a photographer, Chris. What you shoot and how this affected you late March 2020 when this horrible lockdown thing started.
It's a strange one, really, because I'm pretty new to photography as a hobby. I shoot landscape. I do a bit of astrophotography. I do enjoy street photography as well. It's not a profession of mine. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. And last year I got furloughed, and the wife just got sick of me being underfoot, really. And so every time I went to town, she told me to take my camera with, and in the hope, I presume, that it would make me be out of the house for half an hour longer than normal. And I took it from there. There was no firm plan for a book as such. I wanted to record the events for myself and for my kids and my grandkids in the future, that they could look back on these times, because we don't know how it's going to be portrayed in the media in the future. Because
it's interesting. As I look through the book, what you've said to me is it's pretty much as you described. There's no what I would call straight format to it, where you think, right, there's going to be lots of pictures of empty streets, there's going to be this and that. You literally did go shoot what you saw, didn't you?
Yes, it was literally just out with the camera, and if something caught my eye, and the way I shoot, my style of photography is pretty much the way I was brought up, really. I've always been an outsider. I've been an outsider looking in. When I was 5, my parents emigrated to South Africa, and I was an immigrant over there, spent 30 years in Africa. When I came back, then I was an immigrant again in my own country, kind of thing. So I've always been a bit of an outsider looking in. And I think I have a little bit of an advantage over others in that respect. I will see things in a scene that others might miss. And that's what I did. And it was only later on, when I was reviewing 2020's photographs, and the wife was sat next to me, and she says, they need to get put in a book. That's where the idea for the book started. I went through all the photographs, and I must have had 700-800 photos from last year. And then I had to try and choose which photos I would use, which ones tell a balanced story of life during the C word. And that's where I got to. It starts off with the book starts off with that sunset. Although they had nothing to do with COVID, it just happened to coincide with New Year's Eve. And it was a comparison photograph between my Fuji X-T1 and my friend's D50-300.
Because you shot the whole thing on different cameras. I think there are even some iPhone shots in there, aren't there?
There's one or two that were taken with my Samsung, with my smartphone.
Right.
Most of the early photos are taken on my XT1.
Okay.
Then the later ones were taken with the XH1.
There's quite a lot of commentary in the book as well, Chris, and telling the story in words as much as pictures. It seems to me like this was a much needed outlet for you in that respect. There's some great writing and great observations in there.
I think I did need it. I needed it more than the book needed it, I think. COVID affected me a lot more than I expected. I was one of the fortunate ones, as I say in the book. I was one of the fortunate ones in that I was furloughed from work, and I was furloughed on full pay. So financially, I was not impacted. There's a lot of people out there that were, severely impacted, but still affected me mentally with that, going through month after month, not knowing if this was the month that I'm going to get that end of contract letter through the post, and not knowing when you can go out. The spontaneity of life just was taken away from you.
It's a very honest book as well. I mean, as you say, there's a picture of your neighbour. This one really has caught my eye. It's quite early on in the book, actually. You pictured her clapping for carers, and she was to succumb to COVID just weeks after that picture that you made. I guess at this stage, I'm going to say you're a photographer, because whether you do it full time or whether you do it as a hobby or whatever, you're a photographer. You're making pictures. There seemed to be that was the turning point in the book. I think that became the heightened sense of documenting for me.
Well, thank you. But that photo was taken. She'd had a a rough time of it of late. She'd battled cancer and we didn't see much of her. She lives next door but one to me, or lived next door but one to me.
Yeah.
We didn't see much of her. And to see her come out and start clapping for the carers, I actually turned around, went back in and got my camera to take that photograph. That was the one photograph where I actually did not have a camera in my hands at the time. And sadly, she did pass on. I've since given a copy of the book to the family, the surviving family, because the two lads got COVID at the same time as the mom. So she passed with nobody around her. The one son was in a coma. It was a tough time for that family. And it was then that the attitude in our street changed, because no longer was it numbers. Now there was names attached.
I assume that the two lads, hopefully the two lads pulled through okay?
Yes, they both survived and they're doing okay for themselves. The one is still got the long COVID symptoms.
I mean, in terms of light and shade, because that's life, isn't there? There's a fair bit of light humour in here as well, such as the sign you stuck on your fridge making it a no-go zone, or the fact you say, never in a month of Sundays did you imagine your hands would consume more alcohol than your mouth. Putting this collection together then, but I mean, I think you've already said it really, it became a bit of a stress reliever.
Yes, it wasn't intended that way. It's a strange one how it came about. There was no rhyme nor reason, but when I started compiling the book, I felt I had to lighten the mood a bit. It'd be too easy to make a book like this and have it all about the doom and gloom of COVID and the numbers and the isolation and everything. But there was parts in the year that people will forget in the future. The funny parts, and I tried to bring that in with some of the photos, some of the wildlife coming back to the garden. There was uplifting moments as well.
In fact, yes, that's a real mix of styles, because you mentioned the birds, you've got pictures of the birds in the garden. They live cheek by jowl with the images of people you make on the street. It's got a I'm not sure this is the right expression, or you'll enjoy me saying it, but it seems to have a diary feel to it.
I think that's probably my inexperience coming to the fore with compiling the book. This is my first attempt at doing something like this, and I tried to get the photos and the story running chronologically, but it was one of those things where I had no idea of what I was doing, if you know what I mean. I rewrote this book about 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
I'd hand it to the wife and she'd go, there's a mistake, that needs to be changed, that's in the wrong place. And it was back to the drawing board again.
Did you take inspiration from other books as well? Was there anything that you looked at the time, Chris, where you thought, oh, that's good, I'll borrow that sort of from there? Or really did you go into it with just your vision and your wife's vision, just the two of you?
The photos were all my own doing. As I said, there was no intention to do a book. It was a personal memoirs or something for 2020 for me, for the children and the grandchildren. It was only back in January that the wife says it needs to go in a book. And then Alex Fredrickson as well. We were in discussions with her book.
Yeah.
And with her doing her book, I started moving forward with thinking, well, maybe I can do one. And I took it from there.
Well, let's get to the logistics in a minute, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to be like, come on, Neil, you said you were going to share or spill the beans on how you put a book together in the first place. So we'll come to that. But the pictures in this book, they end in December. But of course, here we are back in summer, nearly 7 months on, with full relaxation still a dream, figures mounting again, even though the jabs arrived. Did you carry on, Chris? And is there going to be a revised edition?
I have taken a few photos, but the story seems to have evaporated slightly now that life has got back to normal and my work is getting in the way. I'm not going down to town every day. No. Because of the wife's ill health. I was the one that had to go shopping. I was the man on the front line.
Yeah.
And my visits into town were basically like little military operations. It was infiltrate, conquer, and get out.
Yeah.
Then take a snap here and there. And that seems to have fallen by the wayside, shall we say, this year. I have been taking photos, and I'll see how that progresses over the the course of the year. Maybe in 2022, I'll have the year the world got back on its feet.
Well, I hope so. That's the one I'd love to read on the back of this one, a second part. Well, let's talk about the book itself then, and the nuts and bolts of this whole thing. Who did you use to publish it, first of all? I
had it printed by You Love Prints.
Right.
I asked a question on the FujiCast about who did people use for photo books. Because at the time, I only knew of like Photo Box and those kind of companies.
Yeah.
And the costs were just horrendous. And somebody mentioned You Love Print. So I went on to them and I had a look, and there was XYZ was mentioned as well.
I think that's the one Alex uses, isn't it? XYZ.
That's the one that Alex used, yes.
Yeah.
And the reason I went with You Love Print and not XYZ was purely because of the bleed margin.
Oh, right.
XYZ wanted some Adobe PDF thing that allowed them to do a full-page photograph with bleed. And it was beyond my capabilities or my understanding of computers. Whereas You Love Print allowed me to do everything in a normal Microsoft Office format, publisher, I think it was I used. Mm-hmm. And then I just sent it off to them. And within a week, I had my proof copies back, where I noticed that there was a few errors that needed fixing. I fixed those, and then I pumped it off to print. And a week later, I had my 50 copies that I had printed.
What's the most challenging thing then about making a book that's more than this is 50 copies, as you say, the initial 50 copies, more. But, making a book that's more than a couple of copies, for my mates, this is, I think 50, when you go 50, 100, 150 and so on, that's when it becomes more of a commercial book, perhaps. Well, what's the most challenging thing about that? I guess marketing it and selling it.
Yes, marketing is a big challenge. The whole thing is a roller coaster of emotions. In my case, I was feeling like an imposter. When I was growing up, it was the clever people had books printed. And I've never been one of the clever people. I'm just your normal Joe Soap that goes to work and back every day. The biggest challenge, I think, is actually convincing yourself to go with it. I'd taken a leaf out of Alex's book, and I started a Facebook group. Yeah. And I asked people if they were interested just to message me, and the numbers went above 25. Yeah. So I thought, I'll try 50. And I did. And I'm glad I did, because I've sold 46 of the 50 copies. So it's a success in the little amount that I'm dealing with. Obviously, I would have loved to have had thousands of orders, but then how do I get to the post office with all these books?
That's true. Well, and people talk about micro brews, and they also talk about micro publishing, and that's essentially what this is. But it's an achievement, isn't it? It's producing. You've already said it. You didn't think you had a book in you, and you did.
Yes, it's a strange feeling to see a work in print in front of you and know I did that. Yeah. And with my book, I did everything. I did the words, I did the layouts, the photos, the lot. The only thing that I did not do myself was the printing.
And is there anything that you would have done differently when you look at it now, Chris, and think, I wish I'd done that? Or are you thinking, look, this is great. The first project is done. The first product's done. Roll on the next one, because this is what I'd do differently this time.
That's a tricky question to answer properly, because no, I wouldn't change anything in this book. This book has got the naivety and everything that shows that it's a first book. I'm happy with the way it came out. I'm happy with the quality of the book. The feedback that I've had from people, I've had 2 people not too happy about the feel of the cover, because I went for the soft laminate.
No, I like it. It's in some circles it's called, I had a brochure made of this. It's called it's called Curious Touch, because it is curious to touch. It's like it's like a velvet, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know whether I should say this to go out on the podcast, but somebody did once tell me that it felt like dead man's hands.
Oh my God. Well, we'll keep that in because it's an interesting comment. But for me, for me, it feels like I'm touching it now. It's a stock called Curious Touch, and it's fantastic. It's very tactile.
Well, that's why I chose it. I thought, well, a book is tactile. If it was going on Amazon Kindle Fire things, then you lose that. You want to be able to pick something up. So I thought that soft touch laminate would be a nice start to the book.
It is, yeah.
I suppose if I was to be really picky, the only photograph that I would probably change was on page 65, is my black and white lighthouse. But even that, it's there's a reason for it being black and white. And my biggest problem with this book is, and you've probably found it yourself with projects of your own, one photo tells a multitude of stories to the photographer.
Yeah.
One story leads to another. I can read this book and I can start chuckling at things that weren't directly involved with the photograph, but they happened either just before or just after the photo was taken.
In a couple of words, if you were to give a bit of advice to somebody who thinks, I really want to make a book, but I don't know if I've got it in me. You are proof that it's possible. What would you say?
Do it. You'll scratch your head. You'll have high moments. You'll have low moments. You'll have great big times of self-doubt. But boy, that feeling of accomplishment is like none other when you finally get to the finishing point.
Our sincere thanks to Christopher O'Sullivan. In the show notes today, we'll include an email address for Chris so that you can get in touch with him. You may want to buy the book, of course, to live his journey, both in pictures and in experience in producing a first book, or you may want to ask him some further questions. Either way, and we'll link to the publisher he used too. Now, on Wednesday, over on the Photography Daily podcast, I'm speaking to the much celebrated photojournalist Tom Stoddart, whose latest book, made from 50 years of covering all manner of stories across the world, is called Extraordinary Women. A substantial book, one we've talked about in the show's Patreon on the book club. A photographic collection that salutes the resilience, the courage, and women through times of war, poverty, and hardship. Some of the pictures are not for the faint-hearted, but I'll tell you what, if you should need a masterclass in composition whilst the world seems to be spinning faster than the 1,000 miles an hour it rotates at, this is the book. And as ever, Tom, who's become a friend really to the show with his advice, his mentoring, and his sheer enthusiasm for the medium, is not short of sharing many thoughts upon how to make better pictures in that episode.
My style over the years has been working very close to people, shooting in black and white, and keeping it simple. Photography is not a complicated business. Once you press the button the way that you want to shoot and the way it's effective, it's not that complicated. And so I think it's important to have your style and find out what suits you.
The celebrated photojournalist Tom Stoddart on Wednesday on Photography Daily. And of course we go for our photo walk on the Friday. You, the mailbag, you, me, a microphone and our cameras. There appears to have been a nice book theme this week with another coming shortly, but I'd like to say thank you again to Christopher O'Sullivan. It feels like, with my mention of Tom, the two exciting publishing ends of the spectrum, doesn't it? First and established. And hopefully, if you're thinking about making a book, then that could have been inspiration for you. You thinking about making a book, Kev? Another book, Kev?
Thinking about going on a diet.
Oh, have you got to fit? Yes, this is important now. You've got to fit into your wedding. What did she call it last week? What did she call it? Your something slim suit from Zara. That was it. Your Zara slim suit. Is that what you're aiming for?
Man from Zara. Yeah. I think it's a lost cause though. I'm just going to roll up,
literally,
my belly and literally. I'm slipping into middle-aged apathy.
Who's going to shoot the wedding? Oh, we can't probably say yet, can we?
No.
Bailey's coming out of semi-retirement, maybe. I'll shoot your wedding, Kev.
Yeah, I don't know. We will definitely want something. So I need to put my head together for that. It's a tricky date, though, you see, middle of August, Saturday in the middle of August. Yeah.
What were you doing, honestly? Trying to organise a
Jeff
wedding.
Ascoff is free. I always said I'd have him.
Yeah, well, there we go.
I'll tell him it's not like a legal wedding because we've done that, and there's only going to be a handful of people there. So can we have it really cheap?
Cheap.
We're only there all day though.
Right, back to questions. Hi, Kev. The Fujicast is one of my favourite photography podcasts. You guys do a great job together. Feel free to use this as a podcast question. I will. Here comes a what's the best question. I've got an XT4 and a 1680 and a 5140. I'm slowly transitioning from Nikon. So I can't give up my instant classic D750 and full-frame mentality just yet. This is from Doug Nicky, by the way. But I'm seeing so much great output from the XT4 that it's getting easier to consider building out my Fuji lens stable. I'm even trying out the Fringer NF SF adapter next week, which would be great if it works for my FF macro, my full-frame macro, and longer wildlife zooms on my Fuji. My type of photography includes indoor events and performances at my daughter's school, where the lighting's always a challenge. It always is in schools, particularly at plays, isn't it? The 50-140 and XT4 sensor gives me plenty of space to process in post, but I don't have a lens or second body for the up-close, wider-angle, low-light shots. So, and I already know your answer to this part, I'm looking at the X100V. I've had the T and the F and never got along with them, mostly because of my then inabilities rather than those of the cameras. Well, after renting an X100V this past week, I now get along with it, and that's so much fun. Do I consider the less expensive route and get a 23mm, either 1.4 or f2? But I also need to capture fast-moving kids. Or is there something, other Fuji or off-brand, that I should be looking at? Or do I just say, stop overthinking this, and get the X100V?
Sounds like he wants the X100V and he's asking us for permission.
Doesn't it?
That's what it sounds like to me. Well, the X100V is a beautiful camera, and what I would say about the thing that kind of pricked my ears there was the fast moving kids. And the fact is, if you have an T4 and you put the 23mm, especially the f2 on that body, it will be faster than the X100V with its 23mm lens, because the lens in the X100V has different kind of mechanisms in it. It doesn't have the same speed of autofocus. It's not far off, but it's not the same. So if that really is a thing, then you're probably thinking more about a 23mm f2 lens and 1.4. Yeah, 1.4 is great, but again, the f2 lens is probably a bit quicker, but then you lose that stop of light. So yeah, I mean, X100V is such a lovely camera.
Spencer Wynn, who you spoke to last week, he's got the X100V, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And he performs really well for him.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a brilliant camera. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is I'm pointing out the slight difference in focus speed between the 23f2 on the XT4 compared to the X100V. Now, if you put that 23f2 on something like an XT2 or an X Pro 2, then the X100V would probably outperform it. But because he's got an XT4 with all of the latest, wizardry and shebangs going on inside it, then it will be better or quicker to focus, or faster to focus. What they call it, better focus acquisition. We shall consider, whatever.
I think what we should do is, I think you're right. I think he's just asking for permission. So Gemma gave you permission, obviously, for the X100V in the end, let's bring on Gemma. What do you think? Just give us a bit of an ethereal nod to whether he's allowed to get this X100V. There we go. That's all. That's everything you need. Gemma says yes.
Oh, I'm glad she's not growling.
No, well, I've got the ethereal Gemma all queued up now. I sent her a text. I'm glad, by the way, I don't send your wife texts very often. And I'm glad that the texts I send are very business-like. Because I sent Gemma a text. In fact, it was I know exactly where I'd sent it. When I sent it, I was sat for a long time waiting for a load of trains at the Thatcham crossing. And I was listening to the sort of toward the end of the podcast that you recorded together. I thought, they've done really well. I'm going to send I phoned you and I sent Gemma a text, but it didn't get to Gemma, did it?
No, because it got to Rosa though.
Yeah, I know, to your daughter. She must have thought, because I don't think I signed it off as Neil. I thought, well, she must have my name. So I just sent text and sounded really good.
Rosa doesn't tell us anymore because they basically swapped numbers. So all of the old things that are registered. So Rosa gets all of the messages on Friday morning from the bank saying, you are overdrawn. You are overdrawn. And she just stopped telling me now.
Yeah, oh, right. Okay. Well, I didn't say anything terrible. Question from... Oh, yeah, sorry, I've done mine. So question from Kev from the Facebook. We could do with some more emails, by the way.
Yes, emails we need, and also Facebook group. We've got actually a handful in there still, but yes, more the merrier. This is from Michael Dressy, perhaps. I'm not sure, but Michael. Love the show, gentlemen. You guys are now my favorite #1 podcast. My question relates to backup cameras. My primary body is the XT3, which I often use with the 16-80 and the 70-300. I recently purchased an XT30 to serve as a backup camera. I typically use this camera with my collection of small prime lenses. Funny thing is, I fell in love with this little gem and find that I use it more often, especially for kind of candid moments. So I'm just wondering if you prefer to use identical camera bodies or if you use another model to help fill in the niches of your photography needs. I'm very pleased I chose the route I did. Thank you so much.
I personally like to always, if I'm working professionally, I have to have the same bodies. It doesn't always work that way. I'm working with two different bodies in one way at the moment, but generally, I mean, Fujifilm here now, I'm absolutely committed to the XH line at the moment. Can't wait for an XH2. Come on.
We shall consider. It will come, though. Yeah, body-wise, I'm not so fussed about, but I do try and use same sensor generation.
Yeah.
So I mostly shoot my weddings with one XT3 and one X Pro 3 and a X100V. What will it be now? Well, I haven't shot any weddings with an X100V because there ain't been any. But yes, so same generation. But yeah, I would. The biggest risk you see if you go cross sensors, at least, is using the same memory card in different cameras.
Yeah.
You can do it. It's not a problem. Technically, it should be fine. But I would really not put memory cards that have been formatted in X-Trans 3 in an X-Trans 4 sensor camera, for example. So keeping the sensor the same makes, in my little tiny man brain is just easier to cope with all that kind of stuff. Bodies wise, I'm not so fussed.
James Sauls, just before we do, I think this might be interesting going into the book. I thought I'd drop an email as I stumbled across what sounds like a stunning photo book and a great documentary of the now. Well, the now in Latin America anyway. It's a group of 19 photographers from 14 countries documenting the pandemic. There's a little video on one of the posts about the book. We'll include the link in the show notes this week. The work looks haunting and thought-provoking, yet a fascinating document of the pandemic from that side of the world. Photo evidence, red flagged by COVID, LATAM. Have you seen it? Is it one you're familiar with?
I saw the email and I did look it up. So I've kind of looked at it. Yeah, it does look very interesting. I don't have it. Course, but it does look very, very interesting.
Thank you for that, James. We'll include the links this week. Right, book of the week.
Okay, so book of the week this week is a Hoxton mini press book, but it's one of their bigger ones, so it's more like a Hoxton bigger press book.
Okay.
And it's called London Nights. It's as you can obviously understand, it's nighttime London shots. I'll read out a little bit of blurb. So it says, in the glow of the night, the vibrancy of London meets a quiet stillness. This collection of historic and contemporary images features work from over 60 photographers who reveal the city after hours, unnerving, beautiful, eerie, and energized. Sounds like they talk about you. Sometimes all in one. Step into the night to discover a darker, richer side to the capital. So yeah, it's a hardback book, although it may have been republished. I don't know whether this is like a first edition or not. However, I'm looking at the Hoxton Mini Press website now, which if you go on there, be sure to kind of lock your credit card in a different room. Okay. It is available to add to your cart for £19.95. But it's really interesting because it's not all black and white in colour, but it's beautifully produced, as all Hoxton Mini Press books are. The paper is nice. It's got a nice kind of coat to it, and the printing is wonderful as always. And the text is very. What I like about the Hoxton Mini Press books are they really think about the design of the text as well, and the layout and the font, and it's very subtle, the text, but it's it just gives you one simple sentence effectively describing the picture. So I'm looking at one here. This is a photograph by Alan Delaney. It says B 1958, so he was born in 1958. Delaney spent 10 years on personal exploration of the urban landscape at night, seeking out the beauty to be found in available light. And that looks like what does it say? It's the M11 Woodford Green, 1988. It definitely wasn't where I thought it was, but it's you've got some roadworks going on. You've got some kind of people setting a little kind of drum fire going. So is there anything really up to date in there as well? I'm wondering, for example, I don't have the book in front of me, whether Nick Turpin's on the night bus stuff that he did in London, which was great London night work, whether that would be a feature in there. Not sure. There's a biography at the front of everybody, but there's 60 odd people in there. It is relatively up to date in that there's a wonderful picture of Fabric nightclub in Farringdon. 5 a.m.
5 a.m?
5 a.m. Look at them dancing away.
Do you remember those days where we would go out and still be up at 5 o'clock in the morning? Were there? Really?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never been one. I mean, rugby club tours, you'd go on a Friday and there's actually no point in booking hotel rooms. You can just come back on Monday and never go home, never go to the hotel room. But I was never one for thinking, I want to go nightclub until 5 o'clock in the morning. A quiet pint in the pub and a curry on the way home was my scene. Yeah, so it's one of those ones. So I'm drawn more to the older pictures, I have to say, the ones again with the nostalgia stuff.
It's always nostalgia, though, isn't it? Really, that's what drives you.
Yeah, and the central spread page is a double page spread, and it's a chap. It's a traditional black cab with the old fashioned for hire signs. Remember the flip over ones? It would be up the right way if it was for hire, and then you would just flip it over so it said Erie for whatever it says upside down instead of the digital ones now. And there's a guy walking along with a board, so you would walk around the streets of London, and he's advertising a curry restaurant on Germain Street. There's a lovely one here, Bert Hardy. That's a Bert Hardy picture.
I'm a bit of a Bert Hardy fan.
Yeah, from Life in the Elephant, made for Picture Post 1948, and it's a woman leaning against the wall, having a cigarette, as they all did in those days, because it was good for you, in the kind of basking in the light from a street lamp. She's just there, she's got her hairnet on and a kind of Margaret Thatcher handbag and kind of woolen coat and her stockings all the way up. Yeah, interesting stuff. There's some weird pictures in there, I have to say, that are not pictures that I would necessarily look at them and think, oh, that's late night London. There's some kind of landscapey type stuff, really. Pictures of kind of gravel on the road, that kind of stuff as well. Oh, this was an interesting one. Brian Griffin. I like this one. The text of this picture is, Griffin photographed a dramatic sequence from which these are selected, portraying an imaginary nuclear attack on London. The threatened impact suggested throughout actions and play on lighting. So, yeah, really interesting. So he's got this kind of one picture. He's in a driver's seat of a car. He's photographing through the window, and all you can see is this the body of a man who's on his arm pointing out into the distance, telling him where to go. So yeah, it's all good. I mean, it's really interesting stuff. I think probably if you know London, you'll find it probably a little bit more appealing. But beautiful book, real one of those ones that you could quite happily kind of leave on your sitting room table and that people would pick up and just kind of glance through it and stuff. It doesn't need to be, there's no particular context needed for this. It's London After Dark.
After Dark. And actually some of that would have been technically more challenging, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's really interesting to see because they're all, none of them are they haven't affected the light in any way. So they're using the available light. But it's interesting when you look at the ones from, so for example, there's pictures taken during or around the time of the Blitz. And, the technology and the cameras then would have been more difficult, of course. They're going to be pushing their film speed, but, they're being very, very clever in looking for the light that's available. So you've got spot lamps from what they call them, the military police and all that kind of stuff that are lighting up the debris. And that absolutely challenging, technically very, very challenging.
Now, you mentioned the Blitz. Do they have any of those pictures taken in the London Underground tunnels? I always find those fascinating, the nights when everybody would go underneath London to remain safe from the Blitz.
Yeah, not that I've come across, but yes, you're absolutely right. There's I also like these simple pictures. There's one from Niall McDiarmid, and it's Battersea 2007, and it's just a picture of somebody's house, and it almost looks like the opening credits of Gogglebox. All the lights are on and it looks like somebody's watching a telly and all that kind of stuff. But the interesting thing is, it goes back to this idea of nostalgia, doesn't it? Where you've got, does that house look the same? No, probably. The curtains won't. The cars outside certainly will be different. Have they fixed the big massive cracks in the driveway? Is the tree still there, or have they chopped it down? All that kind of stuff. Really, really interesting. There's some really nice architectural shots as well. Mike Seaborn doing wonderful pictures of kind of tower blocks. That one there is great. I love this one. The Brandon Estate, 1999. It's 15-story tower block, and you've got all of the light going up the middle where the light shafts are. Where the elevator shafts are. I suppose, or the stairs. And then you've got a handful of houses or flats in there that have still got their lights on. So I'm not sure what time of night it would have been, but some of them have got all of their washing hanging out across their balconies. Brilliant. And, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, really like that kind of stuff.
When we got back from our holiday, we did that thing that you love with since you just mentioned it there with the long lines, because that's something that That's something that really my mum used to do. And we've never done it, but we got a long line out and hung all our washing across the garden. I thought, it feels like 1940s. I shall have to take a black and white picture.
Well, you should come to our house because we haven't got a tumble dryer, so that's what we have to do.
Okay.
We hang it on the Rayburn, or we hang it on the washing line. Yeah, it's awful in the winter because obviously there's nothing to dry. Yeah. So now I know you've got a tumble dryer, though. We'll bring ours around yours.
Yeah, bring it over. Right. Questions. Let's go back to. Have you got some questions there? I've got some really long-winded ones here, Kev.
Yeah, they're getting longer, aren't they?
Yeah,
which is good. Which is good. Okay. From Joanna McIntyre. She says, a wee question again. I wonder if Joanna's Scottish. I recently picked up an XS10 as a second body and wondered what the chances of Fujifilm allowing the front and back wheels to be customized via a firmware update whilst in manual mode. Really wish I could assign it to the ISO to the front wheel instead. Well, again, I mean, that would be one for Andreas or the guys at Fujifilm to answer. I really don't know. But what I would say is, so the XS10 is a relatively new camera, so it will be on the firmware update process line. So, yeah, I mean, you can expect some updates, I'm sure. I don't know 100%, but I'm fairly sure that you can expect some updates to that camera. Whether that specifically will be in there or not, I don't know. But yeah, really useful. I'm not sure why that was never in there, really, because a lot of people do that. A lot of people use their front dials for customizing.
Chris Stevenson. Hello, guys. Bit of fun for you. You're both in charge of your own camera company. You have unlimited budget, and anything you can think of can be invented. This is not a company we shall consider. What would your camera look and feel? In fact, there's a few questions here. So how would the camera that you invent look and feel? So go on then, Kev. It's going to be, I reckon it's going to be a kind of rangefindery thing for you, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, maybe. But honestly, I've always said this, that like the camera, if they could just make a little black box with a button and a lens, I would be more than happy, as long as it could be used. That'd be it. The smaller and the less that it looks like a camera, the better, really. That's what I would probably be doing. But then, of course, there's a lot of implementation difficulties in that idea. That's why nobody's ever done it.
I did speak to a chap on Photography Daily quite some time back that actually manages to make cameras out of all sorts of things. He'd made one out of a block of cheddar cheese. Maybe that's what you could be going around with, Kev. Huh?
That would be terrible for me.
You'd end up eating your camera, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can't take any pictures. I've eaten it.
Yeah, sorry, can't show it to you. Very nice. That picture tasted lovely.
What one revolutionary idea would you implement that has never been tried before? Oh, blimey. Well, you always had this nice idea of the camera being able to actually edit the job before you got home. That's quite revolutionary. I'd like that. That's the one I'm going to put forward. You'll have to think of another one.
Well, I think that is revolutionary, but I think that's something that we will see pretty soon in camera technology, I have to say, especially once 5G rolls out across the world properly. So, yeah, I'm not sure that we can even call it revolutionary anymore. I don't know. What would I think? It's really hard, isn't it? Because what was the guy? It was Graham Alexander Bell who invented the telephone. After, at one point, he walked into his office and sacked all of his inventors because he said, that's it. Everything in the world's been invented. There's nothing left to invent. You can all go home.
He hadn't thought about the mobile phone, clearly.
So yeah, there is going to be, in 10 years' time, everything's going to be so different. It's going to be so different. A lot of people still love the tactile nature of using cameras and stuff. So whether we'll go away dramatically from that, or whether you'll end up with, the sad thing is we probably will end up, or it probably will go along the lines of phones having incredible camera sensors in them somehow. Although as phones get smaller, then that becomes more difficult for them as well. So I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one, isn't it? And maybe, I don't know. I really don't know.
It's all been invented before. Well, when you think everything's been invented before, I'll digress slightly for a moment, but I heard about, you're probably going to say, I heard about that ages ago, Neil. Didn't you know about that? Olio, which is an app. It is Olio, isn't it? Which is an app.
Little chocolate biscuits.
No. This is an app. Have I got it wrong? No, that's Oreo, you fool. Olio is, I'm sure it's Olio, which is an app which was invented. I mean, this cyanide filanide thing, there's two partners, I think, that work on this. The story's lovely. Basically, she grew up on a farm and she couldn't bear food wastage. She knew how hard it was to, she'd worked with her parents on this, it's a family business on this farm. She knew how hard it was, how hard farmers work to get produce to shop. And so therefore, wasting food to her was a criminal act. later on in life, she goes on to make this app now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Where you essentially, if you've got spare food that you're not going to eat, you put it into the system and you say, well, I've got this food, but I'm not going to eat it. And then somebody comes from down the road and they say, well, I'll have it, thanks very much. Free food. Very clever. And I heard actually that she'd even moved now to getting some sort of ambassadorial scheme, or champions or whatever they're called, because the shops weren't getting involved. So they will go and collect food from shops. And they'll do the distribution. That's a fantastic idea in an age where nobody should go hungry.
I agree. There's no point in me having that app.
What is that?
There's more food on your plate.
Yeah. Well, you can't abuse it, Kev. You can't just go and pick everything up. I'll have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have that, please. Anybody got any food? Yeah, I'll have that, please. Thank you.
Cracking idea, though. Really good idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Very ethical as well. I like that. That's good. So the website is oliox.com, OLIOEX.com.
It's a really good idea. You can, Chris had a load more questions here. You can only build one, well, he's got three more. You can only build one lens for this camera. What would you create and why? What are you going to stick into your cheese camera?
Do you think I hope it's not made of, I hope it's not Edam cheese, because that would be made backwards.
Oh, God. Dear Kev, we need you. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah.
I've been waiting. How long have I been doing this podcast? I've been waiting for a cheese gag to come up all that time. That's it. I'm finished now. We'll go home. I'm happy.
Finish the podcast.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, ideally, in the ideal world, you want a lens that not necessarily a zoom lens, but a lens that can. I don't know. It's a bit like this organic sensor type thing that they've been talking about for decades. A lens that you don't need to worry so much about the light getting in, but that's then the sensor on the camera. So worry like apertureless, if you like.
Wasn't it Lightro that had that camera that could work on any aperture? You decide your aperture after the event. Yeah,
well, Lightro was slightly different in that that was the premise of it, and what it did though was it had, I think, 25 lenses in the camera. Yeah. So it wasn't actually one lens that was apertureless, but it was 25 lenses. It was quite a nifty little idea, but I don't think it really took off. I backed that on Kickstarter, and then they gave me my money back. They couldn't make enough, or they couldn't get it to the UK or something.
I bought that camera actually, and it came from America. Then I got a mammoth bill from Customs and Excise.
So do you use it? Have you ever used it?
I haven't got it now. No.
It was an interesting idea. That's why I kind of backed it on Kickstarter. It was one of the first things I've ever done on Kickstarter. I love Kickstarter.
I'd like a pancake lens that is a zoom that can go between, I don't know, something like in traditional focal length, something like 16 all the way through to 200 or 300, but a pancake lens. Tiny.
Yeah, we're now kind of bending the rules of physics, but that's what the question was about, wasn't it? In a world with no limits, what would you do?
Here's one for you. You show this new camera to Martin Parr for endorsement. What do you think he's going to say about it? Well, for a start, he's not going to want to get all that cheese all over his hand.
No. I did it. I'm not sure Martin really does the whole kind of endorsement type thing. You don't see him aligning himself particularly to camera brands or anything like that, do you? So, I'm not sure. He'd probably just say, "Oh, that looks nice. Yeah. Buy a book."
What is your camera company called, and what's the model name?
My camera company would be called Lightning Kev.
Lightning Kev?
Yeah, Lightning Kev. Lightning Kev and his Candid Snappers.
You sound like one of those characters off of Cars.
I'm now a 50s rock band. Lightning Kev and his Candid Snappers.
Yeah. They were quite good questions, actually, Chris. I like those. He said, have fun with them.
What would yours be called?
Oh, I don't know. Lightning Kev, probably. I'd name it after you. Lightning Kev and his Candid Snappers. I think that's a band, actually, Kev. You got a band there.
All that, I like that. Yeah,
it's a new business that can go with our coffee shop. I very nearly, by the way, last week, seriously, no lie, bought myself a trailer to serve baked potatoes from the back of my Kia.
Nice. Well, I'd be outside your house all of the time.
Yeah, I thought, F this. I can't be doing photography anymore. I'm going to go and sell potatoes. Boris doesn't want me to make pictures. I had a meltdown moment. A cheese meltdown moment on potato.
Your potato selling business?
I don't know. Oh, no, I do know. I know exactly. I know because we talked about it. The grumpy potato.
Ah, perfect.
And
yeah,
I would dress up as a potato in this. Honestly, it's a great little truck. I would dress up as a baked potato, and I'd look really miserable. And people would come from miles around because have you seen that guy that's really, really miserable that sells baked potatoes? He's so funny. There we go. That was my business idea last week.
It'd probably make you a lot more money than weddings at the moment.
It probably would. Oh, dear. I tell you what, a friend of mine, Simon, who I worked with on the radio years ago, we all thought he was mad when he went and bought himself a really beaten up old trailer and this old Discovery that just rattled as it came into the car park. And he said he was going to go and sell burgers at festivals and stuff. Now he has a fleet of them. He makes a fortune.
Yeah, I know. I know somebody who does it. Goes to all the festivals and does it, and he's a great life. I mean, he's single, he doesn't have kids and stuff like that. But yeah, he goes to the festivals and takes his trailer, sells. He's a wonderful cook, though. He does Malaysian street food stuff.
Oh, see that now? I can't do any of that. I can only do a baked potato with a bit of cheese or chili on it. Do you want to join the business, Kev? We could both go and be the grumpy potato.
Yeah, I would literally eat us out of that trailer, though. That's the problem.
Really? No, you wouldn't be able to. Sure, you wouldn't be able to eat that many in a sitting.
Grumpy potatoes, I like that. Yeah, that's good.
The grumpy potato. Anyway, that's it for this week. If you want to invest in our new company, the Grumpy Potato, drop us a line. Thank you to our guest Chris O'Sullivan today. We do need some emails and stuff, don't we, Kev? So if you'd like to email the show with your questions, your thoughts, or challenges like we had there were some great challenges there with the camera question, then email them to click@fujicast.co.uk, or you've of course got the Facebook group, haven't you?
Indeed, yeah. Keep them coming, people.
How do we do it in the Facebook group? Where do we look?
There's a thread posted pinned to the top called Questions for the Show thread number 2, because it's the second time. And yes, we will get to your questions.
Super. Right, we'll see you in the Facebook group for any questions you have about today's show. Play nice, of course, in there. And thank you to those we haven't done. We didn't do a shout out for the patrons this week, but know that you are loved. In essence, know that you are loved. Music is from Blue Wednesday, supporting music from the incredible artlist.io, and we will see you next week. Bye, Kev!
Bye.
The Fujicast is an independent Loading Zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.